Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dayspring Discussions. This is a show where we talk about movies, comic books, sci-fi, fantasy. If you geek out about it, we're going to talk about it. I am your host, Sean McGahee, and I'm here all by myself today, coming at you live again for another go. That's right, I had so much to talk about this week that I had to make two shows. Now, if you already listened to my TV finale special that I did earlier, kudos to you. I hope you got a lot out of it. I posted a couple of questions on the social media sites, so hopefully you guys will interact with me on that and give me your opinions, because that's what it's all about. Us all talking to each other, sharing, all enjoying in the same media. Now, I wanted to talk, of course, about DC's Rebirth and Steve Rogers, Captain America, but I don't think I'm gonna have time, guys. I might actually come back and do another Rebirth special later on this week, because I know tomorrow Green Arrow Rebirth and Batman Rebirth come out as well. So if I can read those, I can talk about those and the DC Rebirth special that came out last week as well. So right now, for this episode, I'm going to focus on X-Men Apocalypse. I'm a huge X-Men fan, so needless to say, me sitting here by myself, I'm going to spend at least an hour about it. Excuse me. I just had some pizza and I keep on burping. That's right. I took a little time off after doing this morning's show. I went out, ran some errands, got a little exercise, shoot some hoops, and I had a little lunch. Delicious pizza. Of course, I eat pizza all the time. But anyway, one thing I noticed too was I had some pauses in this morning's show. Just to let you know, when I have a long pause like that, guys, I'm taking a sip because I'm a little parched, okay? So sorry about that. Bear with me. Like I said, I'm not a fan of doing this by myself, but I really want to talk about stuff that happened last week, especially X-Men Apocalypse, since I'm a big X-Men fan. And this show itself is named after an X-Men reference, just to let you know how much of a fan I am. So being that it's a new X-Men movie, I just had to talk about it, and somehow all my co-stars just had to do something else. Like I said, maybe I'll try to give some incentive to join me. Really, the only person that's here when I need them is my wife, which makes sense, that's why I married her. But my boys, a little lacking on the trust, okay? Not exactly the guys I would see in Good Will Hunting, okay? We need that kind of, bond where you can go and just beat somebody up just because I tell you to. It's a little harsh, but I think it's fair. That's what you want from your boys. Anyway, I'm straying off subject here, so let's get back to X-Men Apocalypse. The movie came out this last weekend, hit #1 at the box office. Right now it's sitting at a 75% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, a 49% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics be a little more harsh on this film, and to be honest, I'm okay with that. I understand. I'm going to look at this from two perspectives, guys, okay? As a film and then as an X-Men film. As a film, I get the criticism. I went back last night and I watched the movie again, went to a second viewing. I did it my personal style where it was just me, so I get to go sit up front about 4 rows back from where the screen is, so my face is just, all I see is the screen, no chairs or anything like that. At least I hate sitting close, so when I go to a movie, especially an action movie, I like to sit, as close as I can for comfort. So I went in last night, was kind of engulfed in the screen, and tried to focus. And I always try a movie that I'm really looking forward to, excuse me, I always see it twice before I give a true critique of it, because the first time I'm going in with my expectations as a fanboy, and I expect either a lot of it, and most of the time I might be let down. But then I go in with a second viewing, and I feel like I can judge it better by what it is, not of my expectations. Like Batman v Superman, first time I watched that, absolutely hated it, thought it was a piece of shit. Excuse my language. Watched it a second time, not a good movie, but it's still better. I can see the good things they're trying to do with it. Again, looking forward to the extended cut. Hopefully that'll be better. Captain America Civil War, I loved it the first time. Second time, I could see its faults, but I still enjoyed it a lot. With X-Men Apocalypse, I heard about the critiques before I went to see the movie, so I was prepared for it. And I get it. there are some holes in the story, some things that aren't really good about it. But as a person who has read X-Men his whole life, and as a person who in life, there are three things I will never shut up about if you get me to start talking about them: Star Wars, Superman, and X-Men. So as an X-Men fan, this movie was phenomenal. That's right. I stand by this. As an X-Men fan, this is the movie we've been waiting to see our whole lives. That's all I'm saying. I'm going to drop the mic on that. Pick it back up again and go a little more, okay? So, as a film, I get it. It's overcrowded. It's lacking in some departments. Sometimes it's a little cheesy. But there are so many good X-Men moments in this. It's just so good. So what I'm going to do, guys, kind of like I did with my Captain America Civil War, to make sure that I hit on everything, I'm going to go down the list. I have IMDb pulled up on my phone, and I'm going to go down character by character, okay, and analyze that. It helps me think about the character and the whole story as a whole, and just critique everyone and how they interacted and all that jazz. So I'm going to do that, and we'll just go on from there. Hopefully I don't miss any beats. Starting off, we have our returning cast members, okay? James McAvoy as Professor Xavier, Michael Fassbender as Eric Lencher, Jennifer Lawrence as Raven, Nicholas Hoult as Hank McCoy. Now, these are the characters we met in First Class, kind of the reboot. I don't know if it's a reboot. It's a prequel, reboot, preboot. Is that what they call it now? Is that the phrase? Then, of course, you had Lucas Till as Alex Summers, and Rose Byrne as Moira McTaggart. So I guess they're part of it as well. But to me, the focus throughout these past couple movies has been the characters of Xavier, Magneto, Mystique, and Beast, because they have been the dominant characters, especially Xavier, Magneto, and Mystique. Beast, to jump ahead a little bit, he's kind of a side character in all this. Yeah, he was kind of a love interest for Mystique in the First Class films. And then there was the deleted scene in Days of Future Past where she actually came back to the mansion before going to Washington. And there was a little scene between them there. That's in the road cut, if you want to watch that. And then in this film, again, Mystique comes back to the mansion, and you can see Beast is still a little smitten by her. For me, about these characters, it's about their story arc, okay? Their growth, and what did they learn, and what did they go through in each film. And I feel that Beast has gone through the least, especially the fact that he is still hiding who he really is. He did not want to be a mutant in First Class, so he tried to create a formula to get rid of his mutant cells. Instead, it enhanced them, and he got hairy and blue. In Days of Future Past, he found a way to suppress those mutant genes, at least for a little while, so that he can look normal a little bit. And then same thing in this film, X-Men Apocalypse, where he's normal most of the movie until he goes to sleep, forgets to do one of his injections, and he's blue the rest of the time. I get it. But this character really didn't do much. The only thing he did was kind of a catalyst for Xavier's storyline, or Xavier's character arc, which again, out of the four characters, are the two weakest character arcs in this film, I felt. Beast, while Xavier has been getting students and making a school, he wants to expand it out. He said in the film he wants to turn it into a university where not only mutants, but everyone can come and learn as well. Meanwhile, Beast has been on the sidelines preparing for battle. He made a supersonic jet. He's getting ready for war, so to speak. And Xavier doesn't want that. But good thing he does, because Beast has his jet and all his plans, and he's just ready for a fight. So you can see how those two feed into each other. Beast is preparing for battle but hoping for the worst. Xavier, on the other hand, wants to live in peace with his students and not fight. But by the end of the film, he learns that he has to fight, okay? There are people in this world, such as Apocalypse, that only he and possibly his students will be able to protect the world from. So he has to train them, which is why at the end of the film, you see the students such as Cyclops, Jean Grey, Nightcrawler. They all are in uniform, and Mystique is training them to fight. going off Mystique, she was okay. John Campea, one of my favorite film commentators, totally ripped apart Jennifer Lawrence for her portrayal in this film. A lot of people have, saying that she kind of just phoned it in, kind of walked through it. And as I watched the film last night, I can see there are some lines there where she didn't give as much personality as she should have. Jennifer Lawrence, great actress, phenomenal actress, probably one of my top 5 actresses working right now, definitely in my top 10. She's better than the portrayal or the performance that she is giving in this film. I agree. But she still did okay, you know? I mean, I guess that speaks to how good of an actress she is, that she's able to kind of walk through it all and still give a decent performance. But knowing that she is a better actress than what she's done in this movie, I can see why some people are a little upset about it. As for her character arc, I think she had a great character arc. At the end of Days of Future Past, she was seen by many as the hero who saves the president from the terrorist known as Magneto. And since then, 10 years later, people have gone to idolize her. Storm idolized her, Nightcrawler idolized her, Jean Grey, all that stuff. But she doesn't want to be idolized. She just wants to help mutants in the shadows and not be at the forefront of some giant war between humans and mutants. But she comes to find out that's not where she can stay. She, whether she likes it or not, because of her public persona, because people see her as that face, she has to embrace it. And which is why by the end of the film, she's embracing becoming a teacher and teaching Cyclops and Jean Grey and Quicksilver, Nightcrawler and Storm how to defend themselves. She's embraced her role in that sense. Now, Mystique in the comic books, of course, does not do that at all. In fact, we all know her as a villain, and while I appreciate Jennifer Lawrence as a actress and as what she's done with this role, that's not the Mystique I know. But let's remember, kids, this is an alternate timeline, okay? The events now are not going to lead up to the first X-Men movie. That timeline is done when Mystique decided not to kill Trask. From then on, every character is different, okay? We're not leading to Liberty Island. We're not leading to the giant Jean Grey death at X2, okay? That's not where we're leading. It's a whole new ball game. Clean slate. Got it? So which is why they're trying to do it. Now with Mystique, though, there have been rumors, or, you know, what do I want to say? Little birds chirping that Jennifer Lawrence might not come back again. Now, James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, I think they should come back. Whether they do or not, I don't know. I think definitely James McAvoy should be in the next one, just as Charles Xavier. At the end of this one, Magneto walked away, kind of in peace, so I feel like maybe his storyline is done, although we all know he's coming back. He's Magneto. He's just essential to these X-Men movies as Xavier or Wolverine, because when you look at the whole X-Men franchise, it's Xavier, Magneto, and Wolverine. This trilogy unto itself is included Mystique as well, but I think they're going to go away from that, considering I don't think Jennifer Lawrence is going to come back for another film, especially since people are talking how she kind of phoned it in. Maybe she's done playing this character. Maybe she's done putting on the blue makeup. I don't know, but I can see her not coming back for this film, which is why, hold on to hats, I do think she should have died in this film. And of course, I totally forgot to mention, guys, that this is spoilers, okay? If you haven't watched the movie already, what are you doing listening to me, okay? I'm a big fan of watching a movie first and then going back to see what people have said about it. I mean, that's the way it should be. You shouldn't read a review first. Excuse me. You shouldn't read a review first and then go see the movie. It should be the opposite way, because I want you to go see the movie, kind of have your own opinion about it, and then when you look at other reviews, they'll think of stuff that you didn't think about, maybe changing your perspective or how you feel about the film, but it's adding to what you believe, or, you know, that's the way I feel about it, at least. You know, I went and I watched the movie, and then I got home and looked online and, you know, saw what everyone else was saying about it, really. So anyway, Mystique, I believe she should have died in this film. Because, again, this whole trilogy is Charles, Eric, and Raven, right? And she is that one connection that Xavier and Magneto have been fighting about for two and a half films now. So she was this kind of close to both of them for a long time. And I think her death would have served a greater purpose and would have been a better turn for both Charles and Magneto to see, like, hey, we have to fight Apocalypse. Because there was that point where they both decided they were not going to take it, and they were going to, fight Apocalypse. And it was when Mystique was about to die, so I'll give him credit for that. But again, given the fact that Jennifer Lawrence, I don't think she's coming back. I don't think she wants to come back. I think her death would have served a better purpose, because the only reason Mystique is such a important part of this film franchise now is because it's Jennifer Lawrence. Let's be honest about it. Everybody knows it. This character in previous X-Men films was, a villain, but not an important villain, not an important character. The fact that between X-Men First Class and X-Men Days of Future Past, Jennifer Lawrence became famous. That's why this character is now a dominant part of this franchise. And while I don't believe in it, while I think Mystique has been okay and Jennifer Lawrence has done a great job with the character, I think it's time to move on. That's my opinion. And I think we are going to move on with these new characters, which I'll get to here shortly. But first, I want to round out the previous cast with Magneto, Eric Lenscher. Magneto is my favorite villain of all time in comic books, because he really doesn't see himself as a villain. And there are times when I read X-Men comic books, I don't see him as a villain either, okay? It's people like to compare Charles Xavier and Eric Lenscher, or Professor X and Magneto, to Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. They both want the same thing. They're just going about it a different way, is what it is. One wants complete peace, one is okay with violence. That's fine. They both want the same thing, just different ways of doing it. And Eric, being the fact that he's been through so much in his life as far as pain and torture and suffering, he sees the means to an end as a different way. Charles comes from a loving home, and that's kind of the thing. Going back to what I was talking about earlier on my Flash and Arrow reviews, you have Zoom and then you have the Flash. Both of them have very similar origin stories, but they see things differently, okay? They were just slightly off as far as what happened to them, so therefore their mentality or the way they do things is slightly off as well. And that's what it is between Xavier and Magneto. They have such respect for each other. They truly do care about each other, but at the same time, they see things differently. They disagree, and sometimes we disagree with the people we care about the most. That's just how it is, and we'll learn to live with it. Thankfully, we don't have superpowers, so we're not killing each other over it. Thank goodness. But Magneto in this film, good character arc. He wanted to live a peaceful life, had a family, and as soon as the townspeople found out he was a mutant, that was all taken from him. Sadly, it's very sad, actually, especially considering that his own family was killed as well. But great story arc, especially with the fact that he was the sole horseman that Apocalypse was using to destroy the Earth. Now, like I said, there are a lot of moments in this film that were great X-Men moments that I feel like they ripped straight from the comic books. And Magneto messing with the Earth's magnetic pole, or magnetic field, whatever you want to call it, is straight out of the comic. Magneto War. It's called the Magneto War. It took place back in the 90s, and Magneto was trying to secure a safe place for mutants, and so he kind of threatened the world and was turning the Earth's magnetic poles on its side, basically reversing the Earth's magnetic poles. Something to do with magnetic poles, whatever. Anyway, he threatened the Earth, and of course the governments of the world, the UN, gave him exactly what he wanted, and that's that. But I love that they took that little piece of what he can do, just how powerful he is, and put that in this movie. That was really a good fanboy freak-out moment for me. But I also like at the end that he, realized the error of his ways. Like he said, he's like, I didn't betray you, I betrayed them. That even though he lost his family, he forgot his other family, that he still has something in this world to live for and to protect, which is nice. This film, of course, I think ties up Xavier, Mystique, Eric. This film ties up their trilogy so well, and then sets up a whole new one with the younger characters. And that's one of the things I really liked about it, because, like I said, you can take Mystique out of it, you can take Eric out of it. I still think you need Xavier in there, though. But the next film doesn't need all three of them, or even Beast. Keep Xavier in there. The other three are expendable, and let's focus on this new cast that we've been introduced to. Start a new trilogy, and I think it would be really great. Alright, moving on to our villain, Oscar Isaac as Insabanur, aka Apocalypse. Some people, again, critiquing that Apocalypse not being the best villain. Obviously, you have not read the comic books or know who the character is. There's not much to the character, actually, okay? There's not much depth. Apocalypse, he's all about survival of the fittest, okay? He believes that we need to experience an apocalypse, and the strongest will then rise up, and they will create a better world than what came before it. And that's pretty much it. That's what he's trying to accomplish in this film. The character is usually very stoic, and I think Oscar Isaac did a great job with the character. Again, not the best villain as far as character depth and complexities, but he was Apocalypse. I've read Apocalypse, watched the cartoon, read the comics. That's what Apocalypse is, and he did just fine with it. I loved his whole basket of powers. I love how he interacted with the other characters. The Horsemen, I'm going to get to eventually, because let's face it, beyond Magneto, the Horsemen were pretty much useless in this film. But, oh well. I did love, however, the classic psychic battle. Yes, another fanboy freakout moment. Psychic battle with Charles and Jean Grey, who I'll get to again later on. That's a classic thing in the X-Men comic books. So when Charles decided to fight back using his greatest strength, the mind, I lost it. I was like, yes, this is exactly what happened. This whole film, I was looking at it as if I was reading an X-Men comic book, and the way the characters acted, the way the story flowed, this felt like X-Men to me. In the truest form of sense, it felt like X-Men. The farthest sense of what felt like X-Men was X3. No character in X3 acted how they were supposed to act in that film. So that's why I hate that movie so much. In this film, while like I said, as a film, not the best, but as an X-Men film, I could feel it. I felt like this was the X-Men. Next up, one of the low points of the film for me, Rose Byrne as Moira McTaggart. Now, she was introduced in First Class as being kind of a love interest for Charles, and at the end of the film, to protect her, he erased any memory she had of him. And we flash forward 20 years later to 1983, and she is the one responsible for letting Apocalypse out of his tomb. She went down to check it out and left the door open, and the sun came through, and Apocalypse got charged up, and pop, he's out and ready to cause havoc. I just said that word, didn't I? Oh well. Anyway, she was just there, you know? This film is so full of characters, you can't give every one of them their proper due. And yeah, he gave her back her memories. Oh, did you hear that? That was thunder, yes. Some more rain here in Texas. We love it. We've been getting a lot of it. But if you heard that, my dog is right here under my feet, scared as hell. Anyway, back to Moira. Like I said, this film has a lot of characters. And when you go with, say, films like Days of Future Past, or even the more recent Captain America Civil War, it's all how you use the characters. And I felt like every character in Days of Future Past and Civil War was used properly. This one, I feel like they weren't. Especially, again, I'm going to get to the Horsemen, but Moira, I felt like she was just there. She was there in kind of a silly little thing where she doesn't remember anything, so her whole reason for being there is just one big practical joke. Like, everyone's laughing at her, like, haha, you don't remember anything. That's just mean, I think, in my opinion. But she was there just to give Charles some, funnier moments, which is fine. And they couldn't give her anything else to do, which I don't get. They could have easily taken her out of this film and been fine. They could have found another way for Apocalypse to be awakened, and then that's it. that's all that she's needed for. You could take her out of the film and it would really change nothing else, in my opinion. Now, whether they're going to use her in future films as a love interest for Charles, we'll just have to wait and see. Her coming back into the professor's life, like I said, may pay off later on, but I highly doubt it, considering Rose Byrne is a sought-after actress these days, and she can really do whatever she wants. Well, not whatever she wants, but she can get some pretty good roles. So if she sees something that's going to be a little juicier for her, I think she might opt out of more X-Men films. So, all right. Another recurring character came in, Evan Peters as Peter Maximoff, a.k.a. Quicksilver. Everyone's going to say the highlights, or one of the highlights of Days of Future Past was Quicksilver. His scene in the kitchen at the White House was great. And let me take a pause for a minute because I just remembered something else I forgot to talk about. One thing I felt like this film missed off on was a better relationship between Xavier and Magneto. In the last two X-Men films, there's been that scene of Xavier and Magneto playing chess. And they talk about the situation, they talk about stuff. We didn't get that in this movie, which I felt like would have been a good character moment, which I loved. And we didn't get that. Kind of missed out on an opportunity, in my opinion. That's just me. But one thing I did love was at the end of the film when Eric and Charles directly quoted the end of the very first X-Men movie, where Charles is like, "I feel a great swell of pity for the poor fool who comes to my school looking for trouble." The whole exchange between them is a direct quote from the very first X-Men movie, which I love that line. And the fact that they put it in this one, phenomenal. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay, back to Quicksilver, guys. They had another one of those scenes in this film where Quicksilver, he had to come around and save everyone. The mansion was exploding, which another fanboy freakout moment, because it seems like on a weekly basis the mansion gets destroyed and put back together again. So he had to get everyone out of there, which is fine. It was a little lazy though, in my opinion, because I felt like I was watching almost the exact same thing that we'd already seen. Show me something new. Now, one thing they did do in showing me something new was the Quicksilver Apocalypse fight, where he was running around so fast that he got quite a few good punches in before Apocalypse was able to react to him and take him out and break his leg. That right there was cool. I kind of feel bad for whoever decides to make the Flash film starring Ezra Miller, because between the TV show and what they've done as far as speedsters in the X-Men films with Quicksilver, what are you showing us new? I mean, the Flash, he's the fastest speedster there is, and with the effects you have in Days of Future Past and the other effects and storylines you have in the Flash TV series, I feel bad for the poor soul who does the X-Men movie or is directing it, because it's like, okay, we got to show him something cool. What's something cool, both from story perspective and visual perspective, people haven't seen? Because again, they did such a great job with the Quicksilver scenes in these films, and he's showing his speed, that I don't know how to top it. I hope they do top it, but I don't see how they do. Now, in a personality perspective, you have Peter knowing that Magneto is his father, something we didn't learn before. I don't know how he found out. Of course, they hinted at it in the last film, but he knows it, and he's going off to find his father. That's kind of his whole mission in the film, and yet he doesn't tell him. What's up with that? Especially when telling him would have made the most sense when Magneto was, tearing apart the magnetic sphere of the world, and Mystique's like, "I still care about you, so does Charles," and she looks over at Peter, thinking that he's gonna, tell him that he's his father, and he doesn't. That would have been the moment to do it. Okay, you want to drag it out for more films? Okay, great. What happens if you're not in the next film? What happens if Magneto's not in the next film? You should have done the payoff right then and there, because that would have been the difference. You had Mystique almost dying to kind of snap Magneto out of it, but then another thing that would have helped snap him out of it would have been realizing that he does have a true family. He does have a son as well. And then when he sees his son's leg get snapped and just sitting there, and then also he sees Mystique choking, we've got his actual blood family and his, friend family, whatever you want to call it, both of them dying. That would have made more of an impact to snap him out of it. I'm just saying he should have told him and not put it off for another film, which I don't think they really have a plan for. They're thinking, oh, we'll just not tell him in this one and deal with it down the road. Why? There's no point. That was a spoiler or a tease or whatever you want to call it, that there was no point to it. Forget it. I do like that he's now joined the new X-Men group. And I like the little callback in the plane when they were flying to go save Charles and save the world. When Mystique was talking about, this reminds me of that first mission that I was on when we were going to Cuba, and I was scared, and I had all my friends there, and Scott, your brother, was there, kind of reminiscing, because I'm not the biggest fan of First Class. When that movie came out on Blu-ray, I thought it was okay. I thought it had a lot of issues. I thought at its core it was okay. But then Days of Future Past came out, which I really loved, and that fed from First Class, so then I bought First Class. And once again, this film feeds from First Class, even more so than Days of Future Past. So if you look at it from First Class, Days of Future Past, to then Apocalypse, I think that's a pretty damn good trilogy, actually. I want to go back and rewatch them just all in a row, but I think that's a pretty good trilogy that might rival some other trilogies in the comic book or superhero genre. I might even put it in my top 5, honestly. I'm definitely, now I'm thinking about it, yeah, I probably would put it in my top 5, but we'll just have to see about that and see how time tells. Alright, next up we have Josh Hellman as Colonel William Stryker. So this is kind of a question for me that I had when I had my first viewing of the film. Is, in this film, Stryker has Wolverine, okay? And we'll get to Wolverine here in a little bit. But he has Wolverine. He's already put the adamantium in his body. He's been experimenting on him, sending him on missions, whatever. And it seems as though he knows all about Charles and the X-Men. He knows who Xavier is. Of course, he knows who Mystique is, all this stuff, right? So, at the end of Days of Future Past, we see Wolverine being pulled out from the lake, and what looks like Stryker. Only he turns around, and the eyes blink, and it's yellow, and we know it's Mystique that has Wolverine, not Stryker. So I was a little confused, because in this one we start off with Stryker having Wolverine, and it would have been so much easier to just have Stryker not be Mystique at the end of Days of Future Past, and then just make it clear that he's had Wolverine this whole time, experimenting on him and stuff like that. So I was a little confused, and I thought that they had kind of missed a step in the storytelling here and connecting the two movies. That maybe it's something they didn't think about. But then on my second viewing last night, I kind of read more into the performances, where Stryker had Mystique in there, and he was talking about how I know who you are no matter what form you take. I feel like it was kind of a dig. Like, somewhere along the way, Stryker knew that Mystique posed at her. Now, there's like another story here, okay? There's another story in between these two films about Stryker and Mystique, about how Mystique posed as Stryker, and somehow Stryker came back, found out about it, and, got control of Wolverine. There's a story in there somewhere. Where we're going to get it, I don't know. I'd like to ask Bryan Singer and Simon Kingberg about it, because as a casual movie fan or a casual movie goer who just watches the movie, it doesn't make sense until, like I said, I read into the performances a little bit and realized there's more there. There's a story in between the two movies about these two characters. Maybe even that includes Charles as well. And I want to know what that story is. I want to know how Mystique had Wolverine, and then at the end, as we start this movie, Stryker has Wolverine. So that's what I want to hear. And of course, once Wolverine gets out of his cage, Stryker's like, okay, I know this guy's coming to kill us all, so I'm going to get out of here. He doesn't even bother trying to fight him or, put him down or whatever. He's like, I know that I created a killing, unstoppable monster, so I'm just going to run. Which means, of course, I'm sure he'll be back in the next film, possibly even in the Wolverine film. We'll have to wait and see. Because again, while Stryker may have died in X2, it's a new storyline, so Stryker could live on to cause Wolverine and the X-Men lots of problems for many years. Alright, so before we get into the new cast, I'm going to round out the old players. Lucas Till as Alex Summers, aka Havoc. I wasn't sure how they're going to play this one off because of the timeline. These timelines are, kind of fickle to where these timelines are fickle because First Class was 1962, Days of Future Past was 1973, X-Men Apocalypse was 1983. So we literally jumped 21 years since First Class. And in First Class, Havoc was a teenager, say Charles was in his 20s, whatever, and then you jump ahead 20 years. So Havoc is essentially in his 30s. So when they were going to bring Cyclops in, I wasn't sure if they were going to play him as his brother, as he is in the comics, even though Cyclops is the older brother, but if they're going to play him as his brother or possibly play him as his father, which I would have really, really been upset about, considering that their real father is just an awesome character they need to bring in to this franchise as soon as possible, but that's neither here nor there. So they played it off as a brother. We saw their parents, although I'm hoping that they're adoptive parents because, again, their real parents is a much better storyline as well. And Havoc in this one, again, if you haven't seen the film, what are you doing listening to this, doesn't make it out of the mansion when it explodes. At least that's what we're led to believe at this point. We don't actually see him die, but we're assuming he's dead at this point. But I liked that his death served a greater purpose in regards to Cyclops. Because Jean's sitting there talking to him about how much Alex thought of him and how much he thought Scott could make a difference. And I think that's going to be, of course, the turnaround point for the character. Scott starts off as this kind of rebellious teen with an attitude. And by the end of it, you can see him taking up that leadership role, kind of giving a few orders here and there, of course. But the death of his brother has turned him around and realized that, he was going to be one that was going to do great things. Well, he's not here now, so now I have to do the great things. And it makes sense. It's a great character arc for Cyclops. I'm going to get on him in a minute, of course, but needless to say, I'm very happy how he was used in this film compared to... I liked how they used Cyclops in this film compared to the other films. Oh, what the hell. I'll just get right into it. Okay. Ty Sheridan as Scott Summers, a.k.a. Cyclops. For those of you who know me, know Cyclops is my favorite X-Men. To me, he is the X-Men. If you look at the history of the X-Men, Cyclops has been the one constant thing, okay? The story of the X-Men is a story of Cyclops. You want to debate me on this? I dare you to, okay? So, James Marsden, I thought, did the best job as he could in the previous X-Men films, but the fact that the way he was written was just a jealous boyfriend to Jean Grey, and, as a counterpart to Wolverine, always upset me. Marsden, I think, could have done so much more with that role if he was given that opportunity. And I would still love him to come back and play an older Cyclops and do more, because I know he is capable of more. Femke Jensen, whatever. She can do whatever. But this one, I like that, the focus is Cyclops. I like what he did and the relationship they did with Jean Grey. I think they set that up perfectly to where it's going to blossom and be more. And I think that was done really, really well. I'm really excited to see what they do with the character. Hopefully he's going to be that dominant character that he is in the comic books as well and make me happy. That's all I want. That's all I want, Okay, the big one. Jean freaking Grey. That's right. Sophie Turner, Sansa herself, takes on the role of Marvel Girl / the Phoenix in this film. True redhead, thank God, because Femke Jensen dyeing her hair, I think, just looks stupid. And considering how much this character, I think, means to the X-Men, as much as Cyclops does, I'm glad, they got someone who I approve of. I mean, not that they need my approval, but someone who I think they can do this part. The one part I was cautious of is her English accent. Of course, in Game of Thrones, she doesn't have to hide it. Here she has to pull off an American accent. And while I think she doesn't do a superb job, she does okay. The character herself in the comics, of course, is very girl next door, very motherly. And in this one, it's a little different because she does have that power inside of her. In the previous X-Men films, of course, we learned that Charles Xavier, when Jean was younger, kind of built walls inside of Jean's mind to stop her from realizing her full potential and possibly hurting a lot of people. One of my questions going into this was A, is Charles still going to build that wall? And B, are they still going to go through with Jean's Phoenix power being like I said, a piece of her as opposed to a spiritual cosmic entity as it is in the comics? And they answer both those questions. One, no, it's inside of her. She is just the most powerful mutant ever, really. I mean, she took on Apocalypse, so there's that. And secondly, Charles will not build that wall because now we've seen the extent of her powers. I don't think Charles is going to build that wall again. He's just going to do a better job of training her. And kind of like he mentioned in that bedroom scene. That bedroom scene is very nice. I like it. Of course, she woke up and she mentioned fire, which of course was hinting at Phoenix, and the walls were burning, which I'm not sure if that had to do with, again, the Phoenix or her seeing Apocalypse and his resurrection. But that was good because he was talking about how once she learns to control her powers, she won't be afraid anymore. And I think that's kind of what happened by the end of the film. Is she let loose. She gave it her all, and she won, and she knows what she's capable of now. So now I think, again, she won't be afraid to control herself. So I don't think Charles is going to put up the walls. I don't think they're going to need to, because everyone now knows the extent of her powers, and they can help her control it. But oh my god, going back to the psychic battle, Jean Grey coming through the Cerebro doors, walking like a boss, and then in actual reality, walking out on air. Man, even my second viewing, I still flipped out. Like, if you were there when I first saw that, and my wife will contest to this as well as Josh. He was sitting on one side, Lisa was sitting on the other, and Jean Grey phoenixed out. Splooge, 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 splooge. Oh my god, it was like, it was like I was in geek heaven, okay? Another fanboy mega freak out, just seeing that happen, going full Phoenix. It was amazing. Like, I'm still geeking out just thinking about it. Such a great moment. Just that whole psychic battle I loved, because not only did, Charles be like, you're in my house now, and then also he realized that he could bring Jean into the fold as well to help him fight too. And Charles mentioning that you will always lose because you are alone. That's a great moment. Bringing Jean Grey is phenomenal. Phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal. So, going back to Sophie Turner, her performance, pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. I think definitely has room to grow into the character and let the character grow as well. And I think her and Ty Sheridan, hopefully being the two front leads now in this franchise, I'm going to totally like. At least I hope that's where they go with it, because that's where they deserve to be. The only thing I'm a little hesitant on, well, tell you what, I'll save that till after I get past all the new kids, okay? Okay, next up, Cody Smith McPhee as Kurt Wagner's last Nightcrawler. Great job. He provided some comic relief. He did what Nightcrawler does. He did act like a young Nightcrawler, is what we think he is. He was praying in the helicopter, so he has that bit of faith like Nightcrawler does. He's very hopeful, kind of naive, like Nightcrawler should be. The only thing he did not have was kind of Nightcrawler's swashbuckling mentality. But like I said, he's a young Nightcrawler. He doesn't know quite how to fight as much yet, so that's something he can grow into. I know there are some deleted scenes where the kids all go to the mall. They kind of showed that a little bit when they came out of Return of the Jedi, which, by the way, that was a funny scene, of course, poking fun at X3 as well. But there are deleted scenes where, I guess, Bryan Singer says that Nightcrawler tries a Slurpee and he breakdances and stuff like that. And he says that stuff will be in the Blu-ray, maybe even a director's cut as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I didn't need to see it. I mean, there's so much else in this film. I'm glad they didn't put it in it because one thing I think this film did really well was finish off those original cast members like Charles, Mystique, and Eric, and introduce us to the new characters like Nightcrawler, Cyclops, and Jean, and set them up. We didn't get a lot of them, but we got enough of them to where we're now familiar with them. And that's something I think the film did really, really well. Okay, guys, here comes another bad thing about this film, the Four Horsemen. Of course, when Magneto enters, you have that scene or scenes where Apocalypse is recruiting his horsemen. And once he gets Magneto, all the others are irrelevant. The only thing they do at that part is just provide good fight sequences, which really aren't that great, in my opinion. Olivia Munn as Psylocke, she looks the part. I know she can act. Of course, I've seen it on the newsroom. She can act, despite some of her movie roles. I know she can act. But again, they didn't give her much to do except for look hot in her purple outfit, which she did look hot. Although, to be fair, everyone else got cool armor. I loved the way Storm and Angel and Magneto looked in their armor. That was super cool. And then they just gave Psylocke spandex or nylon or whatever that was. I'd feel kind of gypped if I were her. But either way, she looked hot. She just didn't have a lot to do. At the end of the movie, she, looked up, looked kind of pissed, and then walked away. So I don't think that's the last we've seen of her. But she just didn't have a lot to do. She had some cool fight sequences or cool things that she did. The coolest, I think, being when she was falling from the plane, she used her psychic blade to cut down the building and brace herself so she wouldn't die. But the thing about Psylocke is, well, she's also a psychic, okay? I mean, they kind of hinted at that at the beginning, but for the rest of the film, she didn't use any of her psychic abilities. Now, she's not as powerful as, say, Charles or Jean Grey, but she's still pretty powerful. And the fact that she really didn't get to see that at all is kind of discredit to the character, too. Now, in the comics, her boyfriend, or the love of her life, is Warren Worthington III, a.k.a. Angel, a.k.a. Archangel. And in this film, that character is played by Ben Hardy. Angel, again, another character that just didn't get his just due. He was introduced as, kind of a character to fight Nightcrawler. Then he was like a punk rocker. This is a character in the comic books who was shunned by his father, the rich billionaire, when he found out that he was a mutant. And I guess that could have gone for him to run away and, join a fighting pit and drink vodka and listen to Metallica. I don't know. We never got that backstory from him, so I don't know what's his character storyline. All I know is that he fights, he's pretty angry, he gets some metal wings, and then he dies. Which is kind of sucks because I do like the character, but the best thing about Angel or Warren in the comics is his transformation into Archangel. How the suffering he goes through, his connection to Apocalypse, his hatred for Apocalypse for doing this to him as well. And since they killed Apocalypse in this film, I guess the best storyline for Warren is done. So I guess I can't credit them or discredit them really, for killing off Angel if they already killed off Apocalypse. So, okay, we'll move on. And finally, moving on to our last horseman, Alex Shipp played Aurora Monroe, aka Storm. Storm being a popular X-Men character. At the end of the film, of course, she flips and joins the X-Men at the end, which I think she did okay. Again, one of those characters who did the best she could with the material she was given. As I was watching the film the second time, I was trying to visualize what's going through the character's mind and seeing if I can do the logical progression of her flipping from one side to the other. Unfortunately, with the Horsemen, like I said, besides Magneto, a lot of their time is spent just standing beside Apocalypse and like giving like smirks and smiles or nods or looking cool or whatever. They really didn't do much. That's, this, like I said, this film had a lot to deal with, and these characters were not handled as well as I'd hoped they would be, or as well as they could have been. So that's just it. I am glad this character is staying with it. And again, I'm not sure I still buy her character flip, because she was okay with joining Apocalypse and wanting to destroy the world. But then when she sees him killing all the X-Men and the mutants, that's when she decides to flip. Now, you're okay with destroying the world, but not mutants. I don't get that. I mean, it's kind of lost a little. Maybe if I try to watch it again, I'll, get it. There were a lot of times in this film, too, especially with Mystique. I tried to watch Jennifer Lawrence's performance a little more carefully, and there was a couple times where they kind of paused her and she gave a look that helped in her progression quite a bit. With Storm, there was those looks at the final battle where they kept flashing back to her, where she looked worried or curious, and to me those looks just didn't say, hey, I'm rethinking my choices here. So, but she is now an X-Men. We can move past it. Hopefully her and Jean Grey become best friends like they do in the comics, and they give her a little more to do. Now, someone who I don't think is going to become a best friend of Jean Grey's is Jubilee, played by Lana Condor. Jubilee, kind of like they're comparing her to Rogue in Days of Future Past. She actually had a lot more to do in the film, but they cut her scenes. There were scenes with the kids in the mall where she used her powers and had more dialogue and all that jazz, but it was cut, and we'll probably see that again. So while Days of Future Past came out with a Rogue cut, which we see a lot more Rogue, now we know that in X-Men Apocalypse we can come out with the Jubilee cut, where we see a lot more Jubilee. But how unimportant is this character if, when Stryker comes to take all, the mutants away or the X-Men away, not only does she leave her, but also when Jean, Nightcrawler, and Cyclops go to get on the helicopter and possibly save the day, she's not with them either. They just went to the mall together. They just hung out. Cyclops runs to the destroyed mansion to cry for his brother. Jean goes after him, understandably. Nightcrawler kind of falls behind. And I feel like if they all just hung out and got to know each other a little better, Jubilee should have been right there as well. She should have ducked and covered with them when Stryker's men came to look for him. But she wasn't. So I feel like she got a little short-handed on that, got the shaft a little. Which, honestly, Jubilee, she's a fine character. Not one of my favorites. But I feel like, I feel bad for her a little bit, I guess. But not bad enough to where she, A, didn't go with them to save the day, and B, if you look at that final scene of the new roster of X-Men, she's still not in that roster, even though she just, like I said, hung out and became friends with Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Nightcrawler. She's still not an X-Man. So let's all take a moment and have a pity party for Jubilee. Okay, I'm done. Moving on. Let's see here. Let me continue down IMDb. Oh, yeah. I got to give a shout out to Ali Sheedy as Scott's teacher. Little John Hughes alumni there. Getting a little love. That's great. Of course, it is an 80s movie, so to have a member of the Breakfast Club in the John Hughes films was good. The actress and actresses who played Magneto's daughter and wife were pretty damn okay, if you ask me. Although not a pivotal part of the film. Caliban, yeah, he was good. Peter's mom, he's fine. You got the Stan Lee cameo in there. He didn't say much, so really wasn't too much. Keep going. I'm not seeing a lot, so okay. Let's get into it then. Wolverine. Apparently, I've heard rumors that Wolverine was supposed to be a bigger part of this film. He was supposed to be that character that, unlike Mystique, they broke him out and he was supposed to be the veteran that then led them and trained them. I'm really glad they didn't, because I'm so freaking sick of Wolverine in all these X-Men films. Now, I know it's going to make you seem that I'm against Wolverine. I'm not. I like him as a character, although much like Batman and all these other anti-hero-ish characters who people think are so cool, he's overused. He's a fine character. He's just overused, and definitely in these X-Men movies. Definitely. So this scene, I think they used him just fine. He went berserker. He got out. Just as he was about to get out, Jean Grey kind of helped him out a little bit, which again will explain kind of their connection or his connection to her later on, because she did unlock a piece of his mind and help him regain just a little bit of sanity, which was fine. And of course, I love Scott's line where he's like, "I hope we never see that guy again," which again, something I forgot to mention about Jean Grey, when they're in the helicopter going, and Jean Grey is telling Scott about his brother and what he wanted him for him. Scott's like, "How do you know he felt that way?" And Jean's like, "I know what everyone feels," referring to her power and kind of her burden as well, about how powerful she is, and just kind of the cross she has to bear as well, which I thought was a really good line in the film. So Wolverine runs off. Like I said, Jean, I'm glad. I mentioned this before, where I didn't want it to seem like a Hugh Jackman, who's in his 40s or 50s, is kind of ogling a Sophie Turner who just turned 20 years old. Okay, didn't seem I want to be a little weird, and that's another thing I want to touch on was the fast forwarding throughout time. Allegedly, in these next X-Men movies, whatever, they've been jumping decades, and they're probably going to get to the 90s, which means Ty Sheridan and Sophie Turner, who just turned 20 and are like teenagers kind of in the movie, they have to jump ahead 10 years and play someone in their mid-20s. Okay, there's 2-3 years for the next X-Men movie. I can buy that. But then, say they jump another 10 years. Well, then you're going to have actors who are in their mid-20s who are going to have to look like they're in their mid-30s. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to buy that. Okay, I say I like these young kids as young kids now. Okay, we got Storm, Nightcrawler, Jean Grey, Quicksilver, Cyclops. Let's jump ahead, but let's not jump ahead so many years, okay? I like these actors. I like these characters. I want to see them progress. I don't want to jump ahead 10 years. I don't. Okay? I don't want to see it. Let's just keep them younger so we can keep the actors and actresses, because I think they're pretty decent, and, not move it up just so we can try to catch up to Deadpool. And I'll, talk about a little bit about Deadpool here in just a minute, which is right now. The end credit scene, if you didn't stay for it, what's your problem? Don't you know how this goes from now on? Any superhero movie that is done by Marvel, you should always stay towards the end credit. So in this one, we see the Weapon X facility, all the dead bodies. They're vacuuming up all the bullets, which I thought was interesting. And you see someone in a suit walk by, go into where Wolverine was being held, and take a sample of his blood. Now, in the second viewing, I was trying to look to see if all that blood in there was Wolverine's, if it was different names on it, whatever. I couldn't tell. And then also, when he put the blood in the briefcase, there was other stuff in that briefcase, which again, I tried to read the label, and there was a fog over it, and I couldn't do that either. So when I actually get the Blu-ray, you can be damn sure that I'm going to keep on pausing that scene until I can read every damn label. But the big spoiler in it was he closed the briefcase and it said Essex Corp. Now, X-Men fans know Essex is short for Nathan Essex, aka Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister, a big X-Men villain who is a geneticist who, kind of like Apocalypse, is kind of got a survival of the fittest mentality to him, but really he's about survival of the best mutants. With Mr. Sinister, he's got ties to a couple of X-Men. He has worked for Apocalypse before. He kind of blackmailed Gambit into working for him as well. And his main thing, though, is his obsession with Scott and Jean. If you go back and watch X-Men, the animated series, which I always recommend, watch the first 2 episodes of Season 2 and the last 2 episodes of Season 2, and you'll get a good sense of who Mr. Sinister is. But his main obsession is Cyclops and the Summers gene, or Summers DNA. He believes that the Summers are the key... Oh, my phone just went off. Sorry. Anyway, that Summers bloodline is a powerful bloodline that can progress mutant kind. And he is obsessed with Jean Grey and Cyclops because he believes that they together will produce the perfect mutant. He believes this so much that when Jean Grey supposedly dies in the Dark Phoenix saga, he clones clones Jean Grey, and then puts her near Cyclops, who is still grieving from Jean Grey's death. And this woman named Madeline Pryor looks so much like Jean Grey that Cyclops falls in love with her, and they end up having a baby named Nathan. Right? And there we go. That's Sinister's doing. He did it. He's got the Jean Grey bloodline and the Scott Summers bloodline, and he's got the baby. Great. There's the perfect mutant. Well, you know who doesn't like that? Good old Apocalypse, okay? Because Apocalypse knows this child is powerful enough to defeat him. So what does he do? He tries to kill it. He infects Nathan with the legacy virus. Not the excuse me, wrong virus. The technovirus. Technovirus, which is supposed to kill him. So what happens is a being from the future, who we find out later is Rachel Summers, the future daughter of Cyclops and the real Jean Grey, comes back in time and tells Cyclops, hey, I can save your son. But to do that, I must take him into the future to help him control the technovirus. Cyclops reluctantly says, do I give up my son and possibly save his life, or do I keep him here with me and he will surely die? So he gives up his son, sends him into the future, and he grows up. Now, Nathan is a very powerful psychic and telekinetic, kind of like his mother. And with that, he grows up to be a very powerful character. But he's got to live with the techno-organic virus. So as powerful as he could be, a piece of his abilities are always fighting that virus. So he never becomes as powerful as he was meant to be. That's just the sad truth of it. Eventually he grows up in the future and ends up fighting Apocalypse, taking on the war on Apocalypse. He then comes back to the present to try to fight Apocalypse in the present to save his future, what it is. And in doing so, he meets up with his father, Cyclops, joins the X-Men. The rest is, comic book lore. That character's name that we all know him as is Cable. That name sound familiar by chance? Well, you should, because at the end of Deadpool, Ryan Reynolds, in his bathrobe in Ferris Bueller style, guarantees you that in the next Deadpool film, you will see Cable. Now, Cable and Deadpool have a long history together of comic books and titles and being together all the way back to X-Force. So now we have Mr. Sinister in the mix, who again, like we said, is obsessed with having Jean Grey and Cyclops produce an heir to be the ultimate mutant. And then we also have Deadpool guaranteeing that we're going to see Cable in the next Deadpool film. Let's put those two together, and what do we see? A connection between this film and Deadpool, and of course, X-Men films that are taking place in the past to X-Men films that are taking place in the future. So possibly Cable, I feel, is going to be that bridge between the X-Men movies and the Deadpool series. Just a thought. And of course, if you've been reading anything on Twitter or Rumorville, it seems like every actor who has white hair or could have white hair and is seemingly buff wants the part of Cable. I'll tell you that. It's funny, I swear to God, every week there's another actor that comes out and says, I want to play Cable. Why? Why do that to yourself? That's almost guaranteeing you're not going to get the role, okay? Just don't worry about it. Go through the casting process, let them pick out Cable, and then we can all criticize it later, right? Because that's what we do. The other part of the end credits scene is something that refers to Wolverine's clone. So Essex Corporation, I'm not sure if that was actually Mr. Sinister himself or somebody just worked for him, took Wolverine's blood. In the comics, they take Wolverine's blood and clone him, only they clone a female version of him called X-23. Instead of 3 claws, she has 2. She's a teenage girl, and she's just as lethal and pig-headed as Wolverine is. And Bryan Singer actually said in interviews, as he was being interviewed for this movie by the press, that he wanted to bring X-23 into the X-Men franchise. So, there you go. Wolverine's blood is in the hands of a geneticist who likes to clone people and move forward the mutant race. So I think we can almost assume at this point that we are going to see X-23, if not in this film, possibly in the next one or two ahead. And I'm fine with that because people are talking about Wolverine and who's going to be the next Wolverine, because after this third Wolverine solo film, Hugh Jackman said he's done. Well, okay, let's not replace Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Let's get a female version of Wolverine and change it up a little bit. That's what they've done in the comics. Wolverine died a year or two ago, I think, in the comic books, and they have yet to replace him. Instead, X-23 took the mantle of Wolverine. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Let's give it a few years, bring a new aspect to this Wolverine-type character by making her a teenage female girl, which, by the way, at one point had a crush on Cyclops. How's that for weird? And, bring something new to the table. Not just, hey, let's just replace this actor and do the same thing with the character. I think it would be something good. So there's the end credit scene with Mr. Sinister, Cable, and X-23, kind of what they're hinting at. And that really got me excited for the future of the films. And guys, I'm over an hour right now. So I usually try to keep these within an hour, and I'm just running over, so I think I've covered everything at this point. I'm sure I've left something out, some line that I loved, or some aspect of the character that I liked or disliked, but either way, I'm at my time limit, so I'm going to go ahead and say that X-Men Apocalypse, a great X-Men film, but an average film in general. If you didn't like it, I can see why you didn't like it. Totally get it. But for me, as an X-Men fan, I loved it. It has its faults, but it has some really great parts for a geek like me to just nerd out on. So, what did you guys think of the movie? Let me know. Hit me up on social media, Twitter, Facebook group, email, dayspringdiscussions@gmail.com. I want to know what you have to say. I'll maybe put up a couple other poll questions like I did for the Flash and Arrow stuff. And again, I want to hear from you guys. Tell me what you thought. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you didn't like. Are you looking forward to the next X-Men movie? What direction do you think they should go? Let's talk about it. I want to get the interaction going and get everyone jazzed up for it, and maybe find out that you guys are excited about this film as I am. So that's going to be it for me. You can hit me up personally on social media, on Instagram or Twitter, Slim Dayspring 12. And then, like I said, there's always the Facebook group, which I try to be pretty active in too. So that's it for me for today. I think I might come back later on this week and maybe do a DC Rebirth special. Maybe even try to talk about Captain America, Steve Rogers as well, because that's something, I'll tell you what. But for now, I'm going to sign off, guys. And there's no real good X-Men sign-off, really, except for I'm going to quote one of my favorite lines from the X-Men animated series, in which Wolverine says, "Start the ball, Cajun."